These days, there's a generation that has come of age having never had to learn how to load film into a camera, and then having to budget the limited number of pictures, or fiddle with f-stops and exposures, or even manually focus, let alone having to wait to have the film developed to see if they even came out, and then paying for the privilege. Yet, for around 120 years, such experiences were the accepted price of admission to enter the world of photography. In the digital age, when we can take nearly unlimited pictures of even our most banal moments and share them with abandon, it's easy to forget that modern digital ubiquity rests on an analog foundation that essentially democratized the image. By the mid-20th century, photographic equipment makers understood the market potential of making photography available to the masses. They introduced increasingly smaller, cheaper, and easier to use cameras. The transformation was held back, however, by the glass plates used as film. Even small plates were heavy in quantity and vulnerable to breaking. Experiments with celluloid and paper met with limited success, but an ideal emerged: an optically clear strip of plastic coated with a photographic emulsion and rolled tightly onto spools to form a small, lightweight, compact package. Flexible roll film became the last ingredient needed to free the image from the domains of the professionals and put it at last in the hands of the average person. By century's end, George Eastman's simple and affordable roll film cameras revolutionized popular photography, making Kodak a household name and Eastman a wealthy man. Yet, while this juggernaut enterprise was gathering steam, it had been dogged from the start by a claim from a retired Episcopalian priest from Newark, New Jersey. The Reverend Hannibal Goodwin asserted that he had come up with the same fundamental process for making flexible roll film in 1887, while indulging his hobby in a homemade chemistry lab he had stuffed into the tiny attic of the Episcopal House of Prayer's ancient Plume House Rectory. He had applied for a patent that same year, 2 years before Kodak applied for theirs. Due to his own inexperience, poor advice, and limited funds, however, its granting had been delayed by revisions until after Kodak began manufacturing their film on a commercial scale. Thus began a convoluted, nearly 30-year period of litigations over accusations of patent interference and infringement. Reverend Hannibal Goodwin's legacy is often peripherally treated in relation to Eastman's story, being either dismissed out of hand by Kodak aficionados as that of an illegitimate usurper, or, if accepted as valid, reshaped to suit the agendas of the storyteller. He was variously portrayed as an example of a special sort of American gumption embodied by the misunderstood lone inventor, toiling obsessively away in his lab. He was extolled as a paragon of humble Christian virtues, and he was painted as a victim of Gilded Age capitalism. In truth, he was none of those things entirely. He hadn't worked alone, for example, and may even have been betrayed by one of his partners. He could flirt with an unchristian-like elitism, and he was possessed of a profit-driven capitalist streak every bit as much as Eastman's. Far more complicated than history remembers, and far more interesting, Goodwin became obscured by the one thing that lifted his name out of obscurity. I first encountered Hannibal Goodwin in 2006 thanks to this booklet, written by the late George Helmke, who I was fortunate enough to have known. George was an assistant curator with the Fleetwood Museum of Art and Photographica in North Plainfield, New Jersey. So I was already somewhat familiar with the Goodwin story when my wife and I moved here to Newark, New Jersey about a decade ago now. Now, each morning I drive her to the Broad Street train station and we pass right by the Plume House. The Plume House, of course, was the rectory for the Episcopal House of Prayer, where Goodwin lived with his family and where he conducted his experiments. In fact, I even got a tour of the attic where he had his chemistry lab. Indeed, if you stand on the platform and you know where to look, you can see the roof of the Plume House and you can see the skylight that Goodwin had installed in order to bring more light into his laboratory. I'm sure people have noticed this and have no idea as to the important history that happened beneath it. Now, the more I studied Hannibal Goodwin and his story, the more fascinating it all became. And it dawned on me that this really deserves an in-depth book of its own. And that is what I am working to create. Now, in the process of my research, I learned that there are transcripts of the court battles over the patent deposited with the George Eastman House Archives up in Rochester, New York. Now, there's multiple volumes and they are in fragile condition, which means that I'm going to have to physically go up there in order to go through them. And that's part of the reason why I'm here on Kickstarter asking for some help. In order to afford the airfare and the hotel and the food for the week or more that I'm going to need in order to go through all of this material. I'm asking for $8,000, and that should be enough to cover both the research trip and a first run of the book. I find this story utterly fascinating, from the technical aspects to the human dramas involved. If it sounds like a book that you would like to read, then I invite you to please support my project. Whatever you can give, it will be gratefully accepted. And I just want to thank in advance everybody who participates in this. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, and I will be issuing updates and new videos as things progress. So thank you so much for spending time watching this video and reading this Kickstarter page. And I hope that you'll consider it worth supporting. Thank you so very much.